Did you know that the oldest civilization in human history is hidden in your Bible under a different name? And that you have probably read about them dozens of times without realizing it? Because the Bible never calls them Sumerians. It uses a different word, a Hebrew word that appears at absolutely decisive moments in sacred history. And when you discover what word it is and where it appears, everything changes. The story of Abraham changes, the Tower of Babel changes, even the location of Eden changes. And the most striking thing, when you trace what happened to this people, you discover that they did not disappear. They transformed. And their mark is still alive today in places you would never imagine. This is what no one told you about the Sumerians in the Bible. Let's start with a question that seems simple, but hides an enormous mystery. If the Sumerians were the first civilization in the world, if they invented writing, if they built the first cities, if they created the first law codes, if they developed astronomy, mathematics, large-scale agriculture, why does the Bible not mention them even once by name? Think about it for a moment. The Bible mentions the Egyptians, it mentions the Babylonians, it mentions the Assyrians, the Persians, the Philistines, the Hittites. But the oldest and most influential civilization of all, the Sumerians, apparently does not exist in the scriptures. Did God ignore them? Did Moses forget to include them? Or are they there right in front of your eyes, and you simply do not recognize them? The answer is in a single Hebrew word, Shinar. In Hebrew, Shinar. This word appears in the Bible at moments that define human history. And every time you read Shinar in your Bible, you are reading about the land of the Sumerians. Let's verify this. Open your Bible to Genesis chapter 10, verse 10. It says there that the kingdom of Nimrod began in Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh. In the land of Shinar. Stop there. Read those names again. Babel is Babylon, we know that, but Erech is the Hebrew version of Uruk, and Uruk was the largest city in the ancient world. The Sumerian city par excellence. It reached 80,000 inhabitants at a time when the rest of the planet lived in villages of 200 people. And Akkad is Akkad, the capital of the Akkadian Empire that conquered the Sumerians. The biblical text is describing, with geographical precision, the heart of Sumerian civilization. And it says all of that was in Shinar. Shinar is Sumer. Simple as that. Biblical scholars and archaeologists agree on this. When the Bible says Shinar, it refers to the region historians call Sumer in southern Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, in what is today southern Iraq. And here is something that the archaeologists themselves cannot explain. Nobody knows where the Sumerians came from. It is one of the greatest mysteries of ancient history. Their language is not Semitic, it is not Indo-European, it is not Afro-Asiatic. It does not resemble any other known language in all of human history. It is what linguists call a language isolate. They simply appeared in southern Mesopotamia around the 4th millennium before Christ, with an already advanced civilization, with developed agricultural techniques, with a complex social organization, with a structured religion, as if they had arrived from somewhere that history does not record. This has generated theories of every kind. But from a biblical perspective, it has an explanation that fits perfectly. Genesis 11 verses 8 and 9 says that after the confusion of tongues at Babel, God scattered the peoples over the face of the earth. If the confusion of tongues occurred in Shinar, and Shinar is Sumer, then the Sumerians did not come from somewhere else. They were there from the beginning. They were part of the post-flood humanity that settled on that plain. Their language is a language isolate, precisely because it was one of the languages that emerged from the dispersion at Babel. It does not resemble any other, because it was separated by divine intervention. The mystery of the origin of the Sumerians may be the most powerful linguistic evidence for the Tower of Babel. But Shinar does not appear only once in the Bible. It appears at the most explosive moments in history. And each appearance reveals something that completely changes your understanding of what you are reading. The second appearance of Shinar is in Genesis chapter 11, verses 1 to 9. The Tower of Babel. The text says, "Now it came about as they journeyed east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. There, in Shinar, in the land of the Sumerians. The Tower of Babel was not built in just any place. It was built in the heart of Sumerian civilization. And this is crucial because the Sumerians are famous for one thing that connects directly to this story: the ziggurats. A ziggurat is a stepped temple, a massive tower built with mud bricks that rose toward the sky. The Sumerians built ziggurats in each of their principal cities, in Ur, in Uruk, in Eridu, in Nippur. Each ziggurat was dedicated to a god, and its declared purpose was to connect the earth with the sky, to serve as a bridge between men and the gods. Does that sound familiar? Genesis 11 verse 4 says, "Come, let us build for ourselves a city and a tower whose top will reach into heaven." A tower whose top reaches into heaven, built with bricks, not with stone, because in Shinar there was no stone. Genesis 11 verse 3 confirms it. They used brick instead of stone, and they used tar for mortar. Archaeologists have confirmed that this is exactly the Sumerian construction technique. Fired mud bricks bonded with natural bitumen, an asphalt that seeped from the ground in that region. The Bible is describing with astonishing precision the construction technology of the Sumerians. And the Tower of Babel is, very probably, the biblical memory of one of those great ziggurats. Some scholars point to the Etemenanki, the ziggurat of Marduk in Babylon, as the most likely candidate. But the architectural model, the concept of a step tower connecting heaven and earth, that model is Sumerian. 100% Sumerian. Now, here comes something most people do not know. Genesis 11 does not only describe the construction of a tower, it describes God's reaction to what was happening in Shinar. Verse 6, "Behold, they are one people, and they all have the same language. And this is what they began to do, and now nothing which they purpose to do will be impossible for them." God does not punish the construction. God responds to the intention, to organized arrogance, to the idea that man, by his own effort, can reach heaven. And the land where that occurred was not just any land. It was the land of the Sumerians, the most advanced, most organized, most technologically capable civilization of their time. And that leads us to a connection that is absolutely devastating. If I told you that Abraham, the father of faith, the man with whom God made an eternal covenant, grew up surrounded by Sumerian pagan temples, would you believe it? Genesis chapter 11, verse 31. Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went out together from Ur of the Chaldeans in order to enter the land of Canaan. Ur of the Chaldeans, Ur, the Sumerian city of Ur, known today as Tel al-Muqayyar in southern Iraq. This city was excavated between 1922 and 1934 by British archaeologist Leonard Woolley, and what he found was extraordinary. Ur was a metropolis. It had paved streets, two-story houses, a drainage system, schools, libraries with thousands of cuneiform tablets, jewelry workshops, international trade. And at the center of everything, dominating the horizon, stood the great ziggurat of Ur. But what Woolley found beneath those streets was even more striking: the royal tombs of Ur. 16 tombs dating from approximately 2600 before Christ. And inside those tombs, a wealth that left archaeologists speechless, jewelry of gold and lapis lazuli of an artistic quality that rivals any modern jewelry, a helmet of pure hammered gold shaped like a royal wig, a harp decorated with a bull's head in gold and lapis lazuli, silver vessels, diadems with golden leaves. The tomb of Queen Puabi contained a golden headdress with flowers, leaves, and rings weighing more than 6 kilograms. This was the Ur of Abraham. This was the wealth that Abraham left behind. When Genesis 13 verse 2 says that Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver and in gold, it was not an exaggeration. Abraham came from a city where gold and silver were part of the daily life of the upper classes. He knew what wealth was, and he left it. And there is something more that Woolley found that connects directly to the Bible. Beneath the layers of civilization, he found a layer of sterile alluvial sediment more than 3 meters thick, pure clay deposited by water, with no human remains, no pottery, nothing. And beneath that layer of mud, more remains of civilization. Woolley declared upon finding it, "We have found the flood, evidence of a catastrophic flood that interrupted civilization in Ur. We cannot affirm that this layer is the universal biblical flood, but the fact that in the same city where Abraham came from there is archaeological evidence of a devastating flood is, at the very least, a coincidence that deserves attention. Dedicated to the god Nana, the god of the moon. Nana was the patron god of Ur, and his temple was the religious, economic and political heart of the city. Everything revolved around that ziggurat, the taxes, the harvests, the festivals, the political decisions, the marriages, everything. Abraham grew up in the shadow of that ziggurat. Every morning when he left his house, the first thing he saw was that massive tower dedicated to the moon god. Every night, the ceremonies to Nana filled the air with incense and chanting. The priests of Nana controlled the economy of the city, and Abraham lived there. He breathed that. He was immersed in the most sophisticated Sumerian culture of the ancient world. And you need to understand what that meant in daily life. The Sumerians did not have a casual religion. It was a total system. Each Sumerian city literally belonged to a god. The inhabitants were not citizens. They were servants of the patron god. The temple was the largest landowner. The priests managed the harvests, the granaries, the imports, the exports. If you wanted to do business in Ur, you had to go through the temple of Nana. If you wanted to get married, you needed the temple's approval. If you had a sick child, you went to the temple. If you wanted justice, you went to the temple. The god was the government. The temple was the state. The Sumerian pantheon was enormous. At the top stood Anu, the god of the sky. Below him, Enlil, the god of air and storms, considered the king of the gods. Then Enki, the god of wisdom and underground waters. Inanna, the goddess of love and war, whose cult involved rituals that included sacred prostitution. Nana, the moon god, patron of Utu, the sun god, and dozens more. Each god had his temple, his priests, his festivals, his rituals. The Sumerians believed that the gods had created humans as slaves to serve them, literally. In the Sumerian poem of Atrahasis, the gods create man because they were tired of working and needed someone to cultivate the earth for them. The Sumerian vision of the human being was that of a tool, a cosmic slave. Now contrast that with what God revealed to Abraham. Genesis 15 verse 6. Then he believed in the Lord, and he reckoned it to him as righteousness. Abraham was not a slave of God. He was a friend of God. James 2:23 says explicitly, Abraham believed God, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness, and he was called the friend of God. Friend, not slave, not tool, not cosmic servant, friend. Abraham came from a culture where humans existed to serve capricious gods, and God showed him something radically different, a relationship based on faith, love, and promise. That was revolutionary. That was unheard of in the Sumerian world. And now read Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 with new eyes. Go forth from your country, and from your relatives, and from your father's house, to the land which I will show you. When God told Abraham, go from your land, he was not asking him to leave a dusty village in the middle of nowhere. He was asking him to abandon the most advanced civilization on the planet. Imagine what that meant. Leaving Ur was like someone today telling you, leave New York, leave your apartment, your job, your financial security, your family, your culture, everything you know, and walk. Walk toward a place you do not know, that you have never seen, based solely on the voice of a god that no one around you worships, because everyone in Ur worshipped Nana. Everyone worshipped Enlil, Enki, Inanna. Sumerian polytheism was the air they breathed, and Abraham said yes. Hebrews chapter 11 verse 8 summarizes it. By faith Abraham, when he was called, obeyed by going out to a place which he was to receive for an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going, leaving the most brilliant civilization in the known world. That is the magnitude of the faith of Abraham. And you only fully understand it when you understand where he came from Sumer, from Shinar, from the land of the Sumerians. But there is more. Genesis chapter 14 verse 1 mentions Amraphel, king of Shinar. This is one of the 4 kings who formed a military coalition and attacked the 5 kings of the valley of Siddim, capturing Lot, the nephew of Abraham. Abraham then gathered 318 trained men, pursued the 4 kings, defeated them, and rescued Lot. It is a real military story, and one of the invading kings was the king of Shinar, the king of the Sumerian land. This shows that Shinar was not just a passive geographical location in the Bible. It was an active political and military power. Its kings formed alliances, launched military campaigns, controlled trade routes, and Abraham, who had left that land, was now facing it militarily. There is another appearance of Shinar that almost no one notices, but which is profoundly revealing. Joshua chapter 7, verse 21. When Achan confesses his sin after the defeat of Israel at Ai, he says, I saw among the spoils a beautiful mantle from Shinar. In Hebrew, the expression is Aderet Shinar, a cloak from Shinar. Not a Babylonian cloak, a cloak from Shinar, a Sumerian cloak. This demonstrates that even centuries later, the name Shinar was still associated with luxury, with wealth, with temptation. Sumerian textiles were famous throughout the ancient world, and here, in the book of Joshua, a cloak from that land is what causes a man to fall and brings about the defeat of all Israel. The shadow of Shinar reached far, and there is one more appearance of Shinar that almost no one mentions, and which is deeply prophetic. Zechariah chapter 5, verses 5 to 11. The prophet has a vision where he sees a woman sitting inside an ephah, which is a unit of volume. An angel tells him that this woman represents wickedness, and 2 women with wings carry her flying to the land of Shinar, where they will build her a house, and she will be established on her base. Shinar, Shinar again. Even in prophecy, Shinar appears as the destination of wickedness, as the place where rebellion against God is concentrated. From Genesis 10 with Nimrod, through Genesis 11 with the Tower of Babel, all the way to Zechariah 5, Shinar functions in the Bible as a constant symbol, the place where humanity organizes its defiance against the Creator. And that gives the land of the Sumerians a spiritual dimension that goes far beyond archaeology. And there is still one more. Daniel chapter 1 verse 2. The Lord gave Jehoiakim king of Judah into his hand, along with some of the vessels of the house of God. And he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasury of his God. When Nebuchadnezzar conquered Jerusalem and took the sacred objects of the temple, where did he take them? To Shinar. Shinar again, the same land. Thousands of years after Nimrod, after the Tower of Babel, after Abraham. Shinar is still the setting where the conflict between the true God and false gods unfolds. It is as if the Bible traces a line that goes from Genesis 10 to Daniel 1, and that line always passes through the same place, Shinar, the land of the Sumerians. If you are enjoying this content, like the video and share it with someone who loves biblical history. That helps us enormously to keep researching and bringing these topics that you cannot find anywhere else. Now, let us talk about something that generates intense debates but is fascinating: the parallels between Sumerian stories and biblical stories. And this is important because many skeptics use these parallels to attack the Bible. They say the Bible copied from the Sumerians. But when you analyze the details, the conclusion is exactly the opposite. Let's start with the flood. The Sumerians had their own flood story. In the oldest Sumerian version, the hero is called Ziusudra. He was king of the city of Shuruppak. The god Enki warned him that the gods had decided to destroy humanity with a flood. He ordered him to build an enormous boat. Ziusudra obeyed, built the boat, survived the flood that lasted 7 days and 7 nights, and afterward offered sacrifices to the gods. The gods granted him eternal life and sent him to live in Dilmun, a kind of paradise. Now read Genesis chapters 6 through 9. God warns Noah. He commands him to build an ark. Noah obeys. The flood destroys humanity. Noah survives. He offers sacrifices. God makes a covenant with him. The parallels are undeniable. A righteous man, a God who warns, a boat, a universal flood, survival, sacrifice, promise. But the differences are equally revealing. In the Sumerian version, the gods send the flood because humans were making too much noise and would not let them sleep. In Genesis, God sends the flood because of the moral wickedness of man. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Genesis 6 verse 5. In the Sumerian version, the god Enki tricks the other gods to save Ziusudra. In Genesis, God himself, the only God, chooses to save Noah because of his righteousness. In the Sumerian version, the gods are afraid of the flood they themselves caused. In Genesis, God has absolute control over the entire process. Who copied from whom? Many scholars assume that because the Sumerian versions are older in written record, the Bible copied from them. But there is another explanation that makes much more sense when you examine the details. Both traditions remember the same real event. If there really was a catastrophic flood, it is logical that different peoples would remember it in different ways. Think of it this way: if tomorrow a devastating earthquake destroys an entire city, the witnesses are going to tell it in very different ways. A scientist will describe it as a tectonic phenomenon. A preacher will say it was a judgment of God. A journalist will report the death toll. A child will say the ground moved and his mother held him. All saw the same thing. All tell it differently. Who copied from whom? Nobody. All experienced the same event from their own perspective. The Sumerians remembered it through their polytheistic lens, with capricious gods fighting among themselves, sending the flood because humans were making too much noise and would not let them sleep. The Bible records it through the revelation of the one God, with a clear moral purpose. The wickedness of man provoked divine judgment, but grace saved a righteous family. It is not that Moses copied from the Sumerians. It is that both remembered the same thing, but only one had the correct revelation of why it occurred. And there is an argument that skeptics never mention. If the Bible simply copied from the Sumerians, why did it eliminate all the polytheism? Why did it change the motivation for the flood from annoying noise to moral judgment? Why did it turn a hero who receives immortality as a reward into a man who simply obeys and remains mortal? If you copy something, you normally keep the attractive elements. The Bible did not copy and edit. The Bible told the same story from revealed truth. The Sumerian versions are the human distortion of a real memory. Genesis is the divine correction. And notice something that many overlook. More than 200 cultures around the world have accounts of a catastrophic flood. Not only the Sumerians and the Bible. The Greeks had Deucalion. The Hindus had Manu. Native Americans have multiple flood traditions. Australian Aboriginals as well. If only the Sumerians and the Bible told the story, you could argue that one copied from the other. But when 200 cultures on every continent have versions of the same event, the most logical explanation is not that all of them copied from the Sumerians. The most logical explanation is that all of them remember something that really happened. And it is not only the flood. There is a Sumerian document that connects in a spine-chilling way with Genesis, the Sumerian king list. It is a document that records the kings of Sumer from the beginning of time. And it says something extraordinary. It says that before the flood, kings reigned for incredibly long periods. The first king, Alulim of Eridu, reigned for 800 years, according to the list. After the flood, the reign periods shortened dramatically. Now compare that with Genesis. Before the flood, the patriarchs live extraordinarily long lives. Adam lives 930 years, Methuselah 969, Noah 950. After the flood, the ages progressively decrease. Abraham lives 175 years, Moses 120, and afterward the ages stabilize at what we know today. The same pattern. Very long lives before the flood, dramatic reduction afterward. Both traditions, the Sumerian and the biblical, remember a transition, a before and an after marked by the flood. The numbers are different, but the pattern is identical. It is as if both civilizations were looking at the same event through different windows. And there is more. The Sumerian king list says that after the flood, kingship descended from heaven to the city of Kish. Then it passed to Uruk, then to Ur. It is a chronology that coincides with the real archaeological development of those cities. The Sumerians were not inventing their history, they were recording it. With mythological distortions, yes, but with a verifiable historical core. Now let us go to something even deeper. The Sumerians also had the myth of Dilmun, a paradisiacal place where there was no disease, no death, no old age. A place with fresh water and abundant vegetation. Genesis chapter 2 describes Eden with rivers, with trees, with abundance, without death. And the location of Eden, according to Genesis 2 verses 10 to 14, includes the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the same rivers that define Sumerian geography. Eden was, according to the Bible, in the same region where the Sumerians located their lost paradise. And here is a detail that very few know. The Sumerians considered the oldest city in the world to be Eridu. According to their own tradition, Eridu was the first city ever built. The Sumerian king list begins by saying, when kingship descended from heaven, kingship was in Eridu. Eridu was the beginning of everything, and archaeological excavations have confirmed that Eridu is indeed one of the oldest settlements in Mesopotamia, with remains dating to 5400 before Christ. Now, the word Eridu has a fascinating linguistic connection. Some scholars have proposed that the Hebrew name Eden could derive from the Sumerian Eden, which means plain or steppe. The word appears frequently in Sumerian texts to describe the fertile land between the rivers. Others connect Eden to the Akkadian word Edinu, which has the same meaning. We cannot affirm this to be a direct connection with absolute certainty. But the geographical and linguistic coincidence is too strong to ignore. The first city, according to the Sumerians, The first garden according to the Bible, both in the same region, both at the very beginning. And there is something more about Eridu that is extraordinary. Archaeologists found at Eridu an uninterrupted sequence of 18 temples, built one on top of another over thousands of years. The oldest temple at the deepest level was a small adobe structure next to a freshwater pool. As the centuries passed, each new temple was built exactly over the foundations of the previous one, each time larger, each time more elaborate, until it became a ziggurat. It is as if the inhabitants of Eridu were trying to preserve a sacred original place, a place they considered the point of contact between the gods and men since the beginning of time. Does that remind you of anything? The Sumerians also had an account of the creation of man from clay. The god Enki and the goddess Ninhursag molded the human being from clay and gave him life. Genesis 2 verse 7. Then the Lord God formed man of dust from the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. Dust of the ground, clay, mud. The image is the same, but the meaning is radically different. In the Sumerian version, the gods create man as a slave to work in their place. In Genesis, God creates man in his image and likeness, not as a slave, as a son, as a reflection of his glory. The theological difference is immense, and there is one more parallel that few know. The Sumerians had a story where the goddess Ninti was created to heal the rib of the god Enki. The Sumerian word Ti means both rib and life. Ninti means lady of the rib, or lady of life. Genesis 2 verses 21 and 22 say that God took a rib from Adam and formed the woman, and Adam called her Eve, which in Hebrew chava means life or giver of life. Rib and life connected in both traditions. It is a coincidence too specific to be accidental, and there is a Sumerian symbol that appears obsessively in their art and which any Bible reader would recognize instantly: the tree of life. On Sumerian cylinder seals, which are small engraved stone cylinders used to mark documents and property, the image of a sacred tree flanked by two figures, sometimes human, sometimes divine, appears repeatedly. In many of these seals, there is a serpent near the tree. A tree, two figures, a serpent. The scene is so similar to Genesis 3 that when the first archaeologists found it, they immediately called it the seal of Adam and Eve. Today, scholars are more cautious with that direct identification. But the fact remains. The Sumerians had a concept of a sacred tree linked to life and immortality, associated with primordial figures and with a serpent. Genesis 2 verse 9 speaks of the tree of life in the middle of the garden, and Genesis 3 introduces the serpent near that tree. The echo is impossible to ignore, and notice a biblical detail that most people overlook. Joshua chapter 24 verse 2. Joshua is speaking to the people of Israel and says on behalf of God, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, from ancient times your fathers lived beyond the river, namely Terah, the father of Abraham and the father of Nahor, and they served other gods." God himself tells Israel, "Your father Abraham came from a family that worshipped other gods." They were not a monotheistic family. They were not followers of Yahweh. They served the Sumerian gods, Nana, Enlil, the gods of Shinar. The faith of Abraham was not something he inherited from his parents. It was something that was born when God spoke to him directly. Abraham was the first monotheist in his family line, the first man in his genealogy to recognize the true God. And that means that the faith that you and I have today began with a man who had the courage to reject everything his Sumerian culture had taught him from childhood. This is what makes the story of Abraham so radical. He did not only leave a city, he left a complete worldview. He left a religious, social, economic, and political system that was thousands of years old. He left the security of belonging to the dominant civilization. and he walked toward the unknown with nothing more than a promise. That is not Sunday faith. That is faith that redefines existence. But do not lose sight of what is essential. The parallels do not weaken the Bible, they strengthen it, because they demonstrate that the accounts of Genesis were not invented in a vacuum. They are rooted in the oldest memory of humanity. The difference is that while the Sumerians distorted that memory with their polytheism, the Bible preserved it in its revealed form, in its true form. Now let us address the question the title promises. Where are the Sumerians today? What happened to them? Did they disappear? And the answer is one of the most fascinating stories in archaeology and ancient history. The Sumerians were not conquered overnight. Their decline was gradual. Around 2334 before Christ, Sargon of Akkad, a Semitic king, conquered the Sumerian cities and founded the Akkadian Empire. But he did not destroy Sumerian culture. He absorbed it. The Akkadians adopted Sumerian cuneiform writing. Their gods, their temples, their mathematical and astronomical knowledge. It is as if someone conquered Rome but adopted Latin, Roman law, and Roman engineering. Sumer was conquered politically but triumphed culturally. After the Akkadians, the Sumerians had a brief renaissance. The third dynasty of Ur, around 2112 to 2004 before Christ, was the last great Sumerian empire. Its most famous king, Ur-Nammu, wrote the oldest known law code, preceding even the Code of Hammurabi by more than 3 centuries. Ur-Nammu built the great ziggurat of Ur that still stands partially today. That was the final golden age of the Sumerians. The city of Ur had probably 300,000 inhabitants. It was the commercial center of the known world. And it is very possible that Abraham lived precisely in this era of splendor. But around 2004 before Christ, the Elamites destroyed Ur, and then came the Amorites, the Babylonians, the Assyrians. Each invasion diluted Sumerian identity a little more. By 1800 before Christ, Sumerian had ceased to be a spoken language, but it did not die entirely. It became a liturgical and academic language, like Latin in medieval Europe. Babylonian priests continued reciting prayers in Sumerian 1,000 years after no one spoke it in the street. Scribes copied Sumerian texts as a learning exercise. Sumerian culture lived inside Babylon like a ghost that refused to disappear, and there is something profoundly ironic in this. The Sumerians invented cuneiform writing precisely to keep commercial records. How many sheep, how many sacks of grain, how many jars of oil. A practical invention, almost bureaucratic. But that same writing ended up preserving their myths, their poems, their prayers, their laws. It was their own clay tablets that, buried beneath the sand for thousands of years, told the modern world that the Sumerians had existed. Because for more than 2,000 years, humanity had completely forgotten the Sumerians. Nobody knew they had existed. Not the Greeks, not the Romans, not medieval Europe. The Bible mentioned Shinar, but nobody connected that name to a real civilization. Until in the 19th century, archaeologists began to excavate in Iraq and found the tablets, thousands of tablets, hundreds of thousands. And suddenly, an entire civilization re-emerged from the sand. A people who had been dead and forgotten for millennia began to speak again, through their own words written in clay. That is extraordinary when you think about it. The Sumerians were lost to history for more than 2,000 years, but the Bible never lost them. Every time a Jew read Genesis and found the word Shinar, he was reading about a people that the rest of the world had completely forgotten. The scriptures preserved their memory when no one else did. The Bible knew about the Sumerians before archaeology did. And this is what most people do not understand. The Sumerians did not disappear, they transformed. Their blood mixed with the Akkadians, the Amorites, the Babylonians, the Assyrians. Their culture merged with that of their conquerors. Their gods changed names but maintained their functions. The Sumerian god Enki became the Babylonian Ea. Inanna became Ishtar. Utu became Shamash. Nana became Sin. The names changed, the essence remained. And here comes something that will impact you. The ziggurats that the Sumerians built continued to be the religious architectural model of Mesopotamia for 2,000 years after the disappearance of Sumer. When Nebuchadnezzar rebuilt Babylon in the 6th century before Christ, he erected the Etemenanki, a monumental ziggurat dedicated to Marduk. That ziggurat followed the original Sumerian design. 2,000 years later, the Sumerian imprint was so deep that their conquerors could not build a temple without following their model. If you are making it this far, it is because you are truly passionate about biblical history, as we are. Subscribe to the channel if you have not yet done so, because every week we bring revelations like this one that transform the way you read the scriptures. So, where are the Sumerians today? They are in 3 places. First, they are in the land. Southern Iraq, specifically the provinces of Dikar, Muthanna, and Basra, is ancient Sumer. The ruins of Ur, Uruk, Eridu, Lagash, and Nippur are still there. The great ziggurat of Ur was partially restored in the 1980s, and you can visit it today. The biblical city of Ur, from which Abraham departed, is an active archaeological site. In fact, in 2021, Pope Francis visited the ruins of Ur and celebrated an interreligious prayer there, in the same place where tradition says Abraham heard the voice of God. Think about that. 4,000 years later, a religious leader traveled to the other side of the world to pray on the same ground that Abraham walked. The biological descendants of the Sumerians are, in large part, the Arabs of the marshes of southern Iraq, the so-called Marsh Arabs, or Madan. These communities lived for thousands of years in the same marshes where the Sumerians built their first cities. They used reed boats similar to those of the Sumerians. They built reed houses using a technique called mudif that archaeologists have identified in Sumerian reliefs from 5,000 years ago. Exactly the same technique. They fished with the same nets. They cultivated rice and raised water buffalo in the same marshes. Their way of life, until Saddam Hussein drained the marshes in the 90s as political retaliation, was astonishingly similar to what the cuneiform tablets describe 5,000 years ago. After the fall of Saddam in 2003, the marshes were partially restored and some Madan communities returned. They are, in many ways, the last direct heirs of Sumerian daily life. Second, the Sumerians are in our daily culture, and this will surprise you because you do not realize it. Every time you look at a clock and count 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour, you are using the Sumerian sexagesimal system. The Sumerians counted in base 60, not in base 10. Every time you divide a circle into 360 degrees, you are using Sumerian mathematics. The next time you look at the time on your phone, remember, that system was invented by the Sumerians more than 5,000 years ago. The concept of the wheel, writing, the animal-drawn plow, beer, irrigation by canals, written legal contracts, formal schools, the first world maps, the first star catalogues, the first medical records with diagnoses and prescriptions. All of that is Sumerian heritage. The first written recipe in history is Sumerian, a beer recipe engraved on a clay tablet. The first known love poem is Sumerian. The first law code is Sumerian, that of Ur-Nammu, 300 years before Hammurabi. The first formal educational system with schools called Eduba, where children learn to write cuneiform, is Sumerian. We live, without knowing it, in a world that the Sumerians helped to create. And third, and this is the deepest, the Sumerians are in the Bible. Not as a people God forgot, but as the backdrop against which God revealed his plan of salvation. Shinar is the setting where humanity tried to build its own tower to heaven. Shinar is the land from which God brought Abraham to start a new people. Shinar is the place where the sacred objects of the temple were taken captive. Shinar is, in a certain sense, the biblical symbol of human effort without God. Brilliant, impressive, technologically advanced, but spiritually empty. Because that is what the history of the Sumerians teaches us when we read it in the light of the scriptures. You can invent writing. You can build the largest cities in the world. You can develop the most advanced mathematics of your era. You can raise temples that reach the sky. But if all of that is built on the worship of gods that do not exist, on human pride and not on faith in the true God, all of it becomes dust. And there is a brutal irony in the history of the Sumerians that you need to see. They invented writing for their gods. Every cuneiform tablet was an act of devotion or service to a false religious system. They wrote hymns to Enlil. They recorded offerings to Nana. They catalogued the rituals of Inanna. Thousands and thousands of tablets dedicated to gods who did not exist. Meanwhile, somewhere in the Middle East, the words of the true God were being transmitted from generation to generation. First orally, then in writing, not on clay tablets buried under the sand, but on scrolls that would be copied, protected, venerated, and transmitted for millennia. The Sumerians wrote for dead gods. Moses wrote for the living God, and here we are, 5,000 years later. The Sumerian tablets are in museums. The Bible is on your phone, on your nightstand, in your heart. That is the difference. The ziggurats collapsed. The cities were buried under the sand. The Sumerian language went extinct. The Sumerian gods were forgotten. Nobody worships Enlil today. Nobody offers sacrifices to Nana. Nobody invokes Inanna. Nobody builds ziggurats. All of that disappeared. Genesis 11 already anticipated it. God came down, confused the languages, and scattered the builders. The most ambitious human project of antiquity ended in fragmentation and oblivion. But Abraham, the man who left that civilization with nothing more than a promise and a voice. Abraham did not disappear. His covenant with God is still alive. His descendants fill the earth. 3 monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, recognize him as the father of faith. More than 4 billion people on the planet today consider themselves spiritual heirs of a man who left Ur, left Shinar, left the land of the Sumerians. And the faith he exercised in leaving Ur, that faith which Hebrews 11 describes as what moves mountains, that faith is still the model for every believer today. The man who left the greatest civilization in the world to obey an invisible God was wiser than all the priests of all the ziggurats of Sumer combined. Because Abraham understood something that the Sumerians, with all their intelligence, all their technology, all their culture, never managed to understand. It is not man who climbs to heaven by his own means. It is God who descends to man by his grace. The mystery of the Sumerians in the Bible is not an archaeological mystery. It is a spiritual mystery. God placed them there in Genesis under the name of Shinar as the perfect contrast. All the technology in the world, all the culture in the world, all the power in the world, against the simple faith of a man who heard a voice and obeyed. And 5,000 years later, the temples of Sumer are ruins in the desert, but the covenant of Abraham still stands. Isaiah chapter 40 verse 8 said it better than anyone. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God stands forever. The Sumerians invented writing, but it was the word of God that endured. If this research changed the way you see the Bible, there is a video waiting for you right here that is going to take you even deeper. Click